This is
Hi.
Joe and Robert again. Today we got to attempt to go through the book of Ruth in one sitting. This idea came from the Bema podcast by Marty Solomon and Brent Billings. We're going to talk about the book of Ruth and how this book is an implication for us and for the people, that the narratives in the book, how we're supposed to treat the orphan, the widow, and the alien. And people that are different from us in any way. So for the sake of time, we're not going to be reading all the chapters. It's going to be jumping around. So let's dig into it, Roberta.
Yes. If you can turn to Ruth 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. So we want to highlight that this is the time of the judges. If you recall, it's when it's the whole mess going on. Sin is rampant in the book of Judges. Everyone did as they saw fit.
Okay.
Right. Luckily, we have the book of Ruth, because this book is gonna redeem. It's a story about redemption. But it's very interesting that this verse is talking about there's a famine in the land, and where do they choose to go, Joel?
Well, they, according to what it says here, they go to Moab.
Which is weird because Moab is right across them. So if there's a famine in Israel, there's most likely a famine in Moab as well.
Right.
So I don't know why they went there.
So where they should go? If there's no Moab, where did the ancestors go? If they didn't go to Moab, what would be the most logical place to go?
I would say Egypt, because Egypt have the Nile, and the Nile always floods, and there's always food in Egypt.
Okay.
And but on the other hand, they're not supposed to go to Egypt. They were told not to go to Egypt. So maybe they are being disobedient for maybe they are like turning to other gods and going to Moab because they are turning to the gods of Moab. Or maybe on the contrary, maybe they are being obedient because they don't want to go to Egypt.
Right.
We don't really know what's going on here.
Last time they went to Egypt, they stayed for 150 years and they became slaves. So
Yeah.
So let's look at Ruth, verse 2 through 7. It says, chapter 1, verse 2 through 7. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the name of the 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab, they lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orphan and the other one Ruth. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return back home from there with her 2 daughters-in-law. She left the place where they had been living and set out to the road that will take them back to the land of Judah.
It must have been hard for Naomi to hear that things were okay in Israel.
Right.
That the Lord had come to their aid in verse 6. Story of our lives, right? Always trying to anticipate, what's going to happen, only to realize we shouldn't have moved at all.
We shouldn't have moved at all. That's correct. So this story is becoming a rough story right from the start. Naomi she goes to Moab with her husband. Then she got kids. Then the husband died. The kids die, and now there are 2 Moabite women. They're married to these boys. So now we have an Israelite woman, Naomi, with no husband, 2 Moabite daughters-in-law, Orphan and Ruth, and they decided to go back to Judah. Look in verse 8. It says, Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as he has shown kindness to your dead husband and to me. May the Lord grant each of you to find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud. So let's break these verses down, Robert. Come on.
So Naomi's saying, I'm going back to Israel. Forget this. But for the Moabite women, it's not going to go well
Probably
in
not.
Israel.
Mm-mm.
As you know, the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Ammonites are the descendants of Lot and Lot's elders and young daughters. And we all know how Lot's daughters became pregnant.
We all know that.
So if you remember Deuteronomy 23 verse 3, no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even to the 10th generation. For they did not come to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt. And they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor in Aram Naharim, to pronounce a curse on you.
Right, so
Do you
Ruth,
remember that?
yeah,
Like,
Ruth so falls right into it. Ruth, yeah, and she's a descendant of the Moabites.
yeah, so Naomi knows this, and she's like, there's no future for you ladies there. You're not going to find husbands in Israel. You're going to be discriminated against, an outcast, single out. You should go back home. Naomi's not doing anything wrong. She's trying to look out for her daughters-in-law.
Mhm.
You know, she just wants them to be able to live their life. There's no future for them in Israel, you know, so she's telling them to go back. If you can continue, Joel, pick up in verse 12.
All right, verse 12 it says, "Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if though there was still hope for me, even if I have a husband tonight and they gave birth to 2 sons, will you wait for them until they grow up? Will you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone against me, out against me." Bitter. Where we heard that? Exodus, right? You talk about the bitter water.
Waters?
Yeah, Mara, right? Mara. That's a root word for bitter. Also for rebellious. You remember the son, the rebellious son, stun the rebellious son. That's in Deuteronomy. That's rebellious, bitter. There's all this mean matter, Mara. So she's saying,
So is she bitter? Is she calling herself Mara because she's bitter or because she's rebelling?
I don't know. Later on, she actually gonna tell them, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara." Right? So it's hard to know what's going on here. Maybe we see the bitterness through this story, even to the point that she say, "Don't call me Mara anymore." Maybe she's angry because God let her husband die. She may be blaming God, or she feels rebellious. She feels full of guilt, shame. Sometimes we feel like that when we do something that we think is not right. So we don't know how to read this story, but maybe she's saying, "I made a mistake. Because I made a mistake, God is paying me, making me pay the price. I never should have come here with all this famine." So let's speak in verse 16, 17. So we, in between what's happening, you know, we see the women, they are weeping aloud again. They don't want to go, but at the end, Orpah said, "Well, see you, I'm
Goodbye."
going."
Yeah.
And Ruth says, Ruth stayed. And this is one of the most iconic verses of the book of Ruth. Verse 16, chapter 1, verse 16. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. You people will be my people, and your God will be my God." What a declaration of faith, huh? Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be even so severely, if even death separate you and me.
Wow, she's such a faithful
Yeah.
daughter-in-law.
Well, Naomi has been a good mother-in-law too, right? So she decides to go with her, and it's a pretty bold move, you know, because she already knows what's waiting for her. That it's not going to be easy, but she's okay with self-sacrifice. So you know, you and I, we tend to align with people that they are like us. Like, you know, we'll go with the Latin people, and black people will go to black people, Hispanics or Hispanic, white with white. You know, our same country, our same town. You know, from New Jersey, want to hang out with people from New Jersey. But imagine a woman that is a pagan. She's a no-believer, somebody that is different, totally different than them, from another country, another race, maybe a different color. She has this narrative of self-sacrifice. She's willing to align herself with other people that is not her people. And in her heart, she's trying to be like God. I see how Naomi put Ruth interest first and vice versa. And this action is going to change the life of these women forever. This action got to take implications, even New Testament implications for people like us that believe in Jesus. So we can never underestimate the impact that we can make to people when we act like God to people, even people that are different from us. So chapter 2, Roberta, we're moving along pretty nicely here.
Now, chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So, in Leviticus, God told the Israelite not to cut the corners of the fields, to leave that part for the poor and the less fortunate.
Okay.
And Naomi knows about this, and Ruth, apparently I think Ruth knows it too, because she's saying, "Let me go and do this." So in the midst of all this sin, in the book of Judges, this horrible cycle of sin and redemption, there are people like Boaz who are still walking out on some level obedience to what God asked, what God commanded. And the people of Israel have a reputation, and Ruth knows that. That's the interesting part. And Naomi said, "Go ahead, daughter, go ahead in the field," and she began to glean behind the harvesters.
All right, so verse 3 says, "So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters," like you say, and it turned out that she was working a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Family member, right? Verse 8, "So Boaz said to Ruth, 'My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me.' Verse 9, "Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whatever you are thirsty, go and get drink from the water jars that the men have filled." Okay, so without a doubt, this guy seen Naomi. I don't know, she was younger. I mean, the text kind of given an idea she was younger. And she caught the eyes of Boaz.
He took notice of
Yeah.
her.
So she's a Moabite, like we say. She's an alien. She's an orphan. She's a widow. She doesn't know how things work out in Israel. But he tell her, "Stay in my property." Boaz knows that she come with a baggage. Her husband is died. She got issues. She's an alien, like we say, an husband. She got all this stuff, and he could have taken advantage of her, but he didn't. He made this statement, say, "Don't go anywhere else, and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to give you what you need. So you stay right here." Not only that, don't be afraid of taking a break. I'm going to treat you well. And it's very interesting because you were mentioning in the beginning that the reason why the Moabites could not enter the assembly is because they didn't give food or water to the Israelites after they came out of Egypt, right?
When they're in the desert.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a sense, Boaz is being generous to Ruth, and he's breaking, in a small way, that curse, that generational racism. He said, "Well, even though your ancestors did bad to my ancestors, I got to do good to you." He's making a stand for social injustice, even though he has learned something different from his family. So you see a Boaz who's a guy that is righteous. Ruth is a woman that she's righteous. So we got some good characters, some mix of characters that are going to develop the story in the narrative of God in the right way. So let's continue. Verse 10, Roberta.
Chapter 2, verse 10. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such a favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before." So I'm skipping to verse 15. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, "Let her gather among the sheaves and do not reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick it up, and don't rebuke her." So that goes well for her, right? He's telling the harvesters, remember the Torah said that you drop sheaves of grain, don't pick it up, you can pick it up. but he's telling them to drop it on purpose.
Right.
And I'm sure that the harvesters who are most definitely a part of his household, and these aren't large fields at all. They are like maybe an acre or acre and a half.
So they're probably like a little bigger of what we see here.
Yeah.
Right. Not too
So,
big. Yeah.
And this harvest is probably your grocery supply for the entire year. And I'm sure his fellow members, sons, nephews, servants that are out there harvesting are just not very thrilled
Right.
with the fact that he's dropping sheaves of grain on purpose for
He's
this
giving
gal.
he's giving their food to this alien,
Yeah.
to this woman.
But this is who Boaz is. You know, Boaz doesn't care about race or her background or where she comes from. He sees her heart.
Right. Right.
He says, I have heard all about what you've done for your mother-in-law, and I see you, and I got you, and I'll take care of you. And we as a society need to follow Boaz's example and look at people's heart, not race.
That's correct, yeah. Look at verse 19. Her mother-in-law asked, where do you go glean today? Where do you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. We know Boaz. Then Ruth told the mother-in-law about the one whose place she has been working. The name of the man I work with today is Boaz, she said. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He's not stopped showing his kindness to the living and to the dead. She added, the man is our close relative. He's one of our guardian redeemers. The story gonna get good here. So then Ruth, verse 21, the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay with my workers until they finish harvesting my grain. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, I will be good for you, my daughter, to go out with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you may be harmed. Verse 23, so Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So, you know, in the Bible, the footnote says he gave her about 30 pounds of grain, more than a regular person will glean on a day.
That's a lot.
So the mother-in-law is like, well, wait a minute, I know what's going on. Put two and two together. This guy is our family member. He's giving you all these goodies.
He's being generous.
He's being
to you.
generous. He's being nice to you, and the wheels start turning. She's like, not only he's a great guy, he's our kinsman redeemer, our guardian redeemer. Now, Leviticus have a whole chapter about redemption, and I think this is very key for this story. You know, in Leviticus, God designed a plan to bring people back to Israel, to be people back into the society of Israel, and they needed to have a redeemer, a goel. A goel would be a man of the family who would take care of those that couldn't take care of themselves and redeem their property and help them out. So after they're cut out of Israel,
And marry the widow.
and marry the widow if he has to, yeah. So Naomi thinking, this is our ticket back. He's the one of the few guys that can actually save us.
Do something.
And he's willing to do it. He's a righteous man. He's a good man. So he wants to do the things in God's way. So let's jump to chapter 3. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have been work, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be in the winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. Verse 4, when he lays down, no place where he's laying, then go and uncover his feet and lay down. He will tell you what to do. So Naomi has an idea here. She has a plan. She's going to say to Ruth, go ahead, get all dressed, put your best dress, go down to the threshing floor, woo this guy over God's narrative, trying to tell him that he needs to be part of our life, convincing he needs to notice you so he can help us. Verse 5 says, I do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking, and he was in good spirits, emphasize spirits, I guess, because he was eating and drinking, he went over to lay down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached him quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned and said, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Now, this is interesting. The phrase covering his feet may not necessarily mean uncovering his feet, right? However, the idea is it's a lot of debate, but the idea may be that she uncovered the sign of his covenant, probably meaning the sign of his circumcision. Basically, she's saying, listen, you have a covenant with God.
So she opened his robe.
Yeah. So it's saying, when you look at yourself, remember you have covenant with God, and God has asked you to be partner with the alien, the orphan, and the widow. God has asked you to partner with people like me. So you need to do the right thing here. So, he said, you are the Goel. So verse 9, he said, who are you? He asked, I am your servant Ruth. She said, spread the corner of your garment over to me, since you are a kinsman redeemer, which is a sign of what? It's a sign of engagement, right? It's a sign of protection. You say, cover me when wear your robe. So what's she saying here? What do you think she's saying?
Be my husband.
Yeah, right. She's not saying, let me go to your house and be your servant. Let me eat at your table. She's not saying, let me be your concubine. He's saying, I want you to marry me. He's saying, a Moabite, an alien, a woman from a different race, different color, is telling this Israelite, you gotta marry me. I want to be your wife.
You gotta do what's right.
Yeah, you gotta do what's right. Verse 10, Roberta.
Chapter 3, verse 10, the Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. The kindness is greater than what you showed earlier. You have not run after the young man, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it's true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Boaz wanted to redeem Ruth, but he wanted to do it in the right way, according to God's law.
Okay.
So even to do what's right, we gotta follow God's guideline for us.
Right.
We'll skip over to chapter 4, verse 1. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there, just as the guardian redeemer that he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down.
All right, let me interrupt you right there. He sat down, all right? So you know where they at?
The city gates?
They are the city gates. This is where, and this is the most important place of the city. This is where the kings give decrees to the people. Armies come and got together. Important and governmental society, business is doing here. So he's going to the town square, and he's here. He's going to do business. All right, and he's not being shady about it. He's not saying, well, I gotta help you, but let's do it in the corner where nobody see. He's not putting a post on Instagram or Facebook and say, we gotta fight for social justice, we gotta do this or that, we gotta help the oppressed, the widow, the poor. But he's doing it publicly. In the town's gate. He's taking action, and action is gonna reflect to generations to come, because this is gonna be a social stigma attached to him. He's marrying a Moabite. His family going to be tagged because of that. So he's doing, and look what he says in verse 5. Then Boaz says, there is another guy that is a kinsman redeeming before Boaz. So he's talking to this guy now. Yeah. So then Boaz say, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, a Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer, the other guy, he said, then I cannot redeem it, because I may endanger my own state. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Oh, I cannot do it. And now, Moabites, not for me. People from another race, not for me. Social stigma to my family, not for me. Somebody different, no, thank you. You marry her. No, me. He's saying we may endanger my state. What a bunch of baloney. It's only one woman. He's not going to endanger his state. He just don't want the larger communal stigma. But what's going to happen to his family, to his business? So look in verse 9. Then Boaz announced to the elder and all the people, "Today you are witness that I have bought for Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so the name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witness." And look at what it says in verse 13. They do the business, they change sandals, you can read that later. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women say to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without guardian redeemer. May he become famous for Israel. He will renew in your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons had give birth to him." Then Naomi took the child in her arm and cared for him. The women living there say, "Naomi had a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. All right. So the story ends. It has a beautiful ending. Jesse's going to get up to be the father of who? Great King David. So these have a New Testament implication for us because Jesus comes from the line, from the lineage of King David. So it's an unbelievable story about righteousness, about love, about obedience that goes beyond social barriers, race, and I love that. So even though in the time of the time of Ruth, the time of Judges, it was a horrible time in Israel, but it wasn't that bad because you had God-fearing people that was helping them. It was not all the hope. There was still hope. And it gives me hope because we're living in terrible times in this country today. Time in history in America, but we need to be those God-fearing people that can make a difference and change people's life forever and for the better. So
this story is much more than just a love story between Boaz and Ruth. It's much more than simply a romance.
Right.
This is a love story about God's people and their God. This is a love story of people wanting to love their God by being obedient.
Right.
One of the things that we look throughout all the New Testament scriptures is Jesus saying, "If you love me, you do what?
You obey my commands."
Exactly. So you obey my commands. Jesus is going to say that multiple times. And here in this book, we find ourselves in the middle of the love story, not just of Boaz and Ruth, but Boaz and the Israelites and their God.
So even though people have forgotten Deuteronomy, the whole country was upside down, they forget where they came from, but at the same time, there are people that wanted to do what was right. People that remember where God calls them from. So the people that remember the orphan, the alien, the widow, and how's that we got to be part of God's mission if we do the same? This is an encouraging, compelling story. Because the mission of God is at work, and you can see the love. And I know the world feel like it's going upside down with the pandemic, social injustice, the problem with racism in this country, and I cannot even begin to understand our black brothers, our black sisters, the community, how they're feeling. I don't have words to. I have had my own experiences as a Latino, but I know I have to be empathetic. We need to be sympathetic with these brothers. We need to love them. We need to take care of them. We need to love people that are not like us. We need to be Christ for those people that they're suffering, they're hurting right now. We must demonstrate this radical love of Jesus, that love that exceeds color, race, and nationality. And this is what Ruth is about. Ruth is about two people who say they want to do what is right. They want to be part of God's mission. They want to take care of the orphan, the widow, the alien. They want to take care of people that are different, people that were different from you and me, people that are different than them. This is a story of they challenge me to be more like Christ. Even though I may be feeling hurt, bitter, confused, angry during this time, I can do better. We can do better. We are commanded to do better as a disciple.
I feel like our experiences with discrimination as Latinos doesn't even, it's hard, but it doesn't even compare
right.
to what was done to our brothers and sisters of color, and our heart goes out to them. And all we can do right now is follow the example of Boaz and look at people's heart.
Yeah, look at the heart.
And be examples and pray for this falling world.
So I want to thank you for that comment. I want to share one scripture to finish. 1 John 4:20 says, "Whoever claims to love God yet hate a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love a brother or sister who can they sin, cannot love God who they have no sin." So we have to pray to God that He help us to change our perspective, our views, the things that we have in our heart, and be ministers to people, not only physically, spiritually, but also those who are emotionally and socially hurting. Roberta, thank you so much for your time, and to God be the glory. Amen. Bye-bye.